good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you fellers?
Well, we were just talking about how we are.
Yeah, we're all pretty excited today.
We're all
chipper and energetic.
We're all sleeping with our eyes open right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all of us are low energy today. So
I have an excuse. I was camping.
yeah.
Got back last night.
Yeah.
Went to Joy's family get together at Triangle Lake and came back last night kind of late. Got home about 8 o'clock and slept really good tonight. That last night, but the nights before that weren't stellar. So I'm like,
You got some catching up to do?
Catching up on my sleep. Yeah.
What's weird is that we
Yeah.
were all gone in different places this last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was gone. You were in Chicago.
Yeah.
You were at Triangle Lake.
You were at the Oregon coast.
At the coast. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Suffering for Jesus.
If you called or texted me and I ignored you, it's because there is no reception still at Triangle Lake, which is kind of a gift.
That's a total blessing.
It's kind of nice when you just
That may be the best reason to go to Triangle Lake.
seriously.
Yeah.
I turn my phone off when I get there. I throw it in a corner, and you just kind of forget about it till you, on the way home you turn it on again, and then it's like 30 emails pop up, a bunch of texts and stuff.
If it's only 30 emails, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
Not too
that's
bad.
not bad.
No,
That's pretty good.
It was only 3 days.
It's a slow Tuesday in my
It was-
world.
I know, well, yeah, the HOA world is a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
So, especially if there's a bridge being replaced or
Right.
something like that.
I'll get
Yeah.
40 to 60 a day, and I'm
Yeah.
not even important.
Yeah, I'd say I'd get probably that amount.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of it's stuff I should probably get off their list or whatever.
Yeah.
I've done that with a lot of people, but
I am an unsubscriber.
yeah, I've done some of it, but I need to do more. So yeah.
Nah, I
You
don't
got all
like-
these people telling you how to run a church and how to revitalize your ministry and how to, you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
kind of stuff is like drives me nuts.
Yeah.
That kind of spam's horrible. So
Craziness.
craziness indeed. What do
Yeah.
we got going tonight, Chad? Is there something going down?
There is something going down tonight.
I really wish that somehow we could post that disclaimer or whatever it is, whatever the band sent you.
Oh,
I wish we could post that and show people.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
is really that's real is really something.
Yeah, at least there wasn't no brown M&Ms. It wasn't on the list. That was so
Just the banana runts.
yeah.
Yeah, took all the other ones out.
The banana runs? What is that?
Never mind.
I-
You know
I-
runts, the hard candy.
Yeah.
The bananas,
Oh,
dude, are the
okay.
best. My son worked at Goodies. My
Okay.
oldest son, it was one of his first jobs, Gage, when he was like 14 or something like that. And he knew that I liked banana runts. And so they had a huge jar of runts that they would sell. And he went through one night and picked all the bananas out and stuck them in a Ziploc bag and brought them home for me, which
Nice.
was just a insane act of kindness and love for my son. And he got busted, man.
Yeah.
Like the manager, Jose, like pulled him in, and almost
You
fired
can't
him.
do
Was
that.
like, dude, like, what are we doing? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, banana runs, man.
So what I'm hearing, and probably what Brent's hearing, what I'm hearing for Brent is that Gage touched everybody's candy.
I was already
Is
in shock. I'm like, okay,
I
Goodies.
don't know how he did it. Like,
Oh,
I don't know how he went through
put
and
his hand
maybe
in
he
there
put the stinking
and
gloves
touched-
on, dude,
No,
like
he-
the
you-
cafeteria workers.
You rifle through and you pull them all out, and you've defiled the entire.
I was so
container.
proud of him, and at the same time, I was like, dude, like you're in
Just so you
trouble.
know,
That's
this is
funny.
all I hear is banana runts. Do 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 do. Banana runts.
Seriously.
Yeah, when you said that, that's what I heard.
Was
Which
that
is
from the Muppets?
Manana,
Da-da-da-da.
manana.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But banana runts.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
That's how my brain works.
Well, you should
Sorry
try
if
them
that's stuck
sometime.
in anybody's head right now.
yeah.
Same with the Willy Wonka wafers. Like the bananas were just.
I don't like candy, dude.
I don't either.
Yeah.
But there's something about these banana
Chad's
sugar.
the
things.
candy guy.
I got a sweet tooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even eat those anymore because my teeth are so bad. I got old man teeth now,
Yeah.
and they just crack if I'm eating a piece of popcorn. So, yeah, got to
So-
be careful.
So back to what's going down tonight.
Oh, yeah,
For
what's
those
going down
that,
tonight?
Like we've left some people hanging, they're wondering like what's going on tonight.
They've already tuned out.
Squirrel.
Yeah. It's the last concert in the summer concert series in the park in Lafine.
Does this mean some of our congregants can go and dance? And maybe
Well,
get-
some of our congregants have gone and have danced
and got filmed.
and have been captured on video.
Yeah.
So if you have some internet sleuthing skills, you can probably find the video.
This one's more worth
Yeah.
going to than any of the other ones you went to. Let's just say
And
that.
there were some people I was surprised to see them
Got
dance.
some moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cutting the grass.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to Cy. I'm just going to call him out.
Yeah.
Cy had some moves.
Yeah.
If he loves to do the running man,
Yeah.
he's got an interesting running man for a white boy, for a white man. You got to ask him to do it
Pretty,
sometime.
pretty,
he
pretty
would.
fly for a white guy.
It's fly.
Okay. Maybe he'll do it tonight. Anyway, The band Cashed Out is going to be playing in the park, and this is big time for
Cashed
LaPine.
Out.
So there's Cashed Out with a K, and they're like a reggae band, and it's not that one. It's Cashed Out with a C.
This is a Johnny
So
Cash,
Johnny Cash.
tribute band.
They specifically say in their rider that they are not to be billed as a tribute band.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They're the premier Johnny Cash
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
Okay.
They
They're
were,
actually
they were really
considered-
specific about that language.
Yeah. They're actually considered like the best out there as far as their sound.
Yeah.
That
like-
Chad got booked them for this is
Well, do you wanna
actually
hear the story
kind of a
behind
big
it?
deal.
You tell the story.
So me and Chad went to see Cashed Out. They were playing at the Volcanic
Yeah.
Theater in
Last
Bend.
year.
Yeah. I'd seen them a few times, and I loved them, and I thought, gosh, I want to go see these guys every time they come. Anyway, we were there early to see the opening bands, which I don't know if they were going or not, but
They were going and they weren't great.
But Doug, who is Johnny Cash, he's the main guy in this band. His name is Doug, was out sitting on a table somewhere by himself, smoking one cigarette after another before the show.
yeah.
So
He probably
me
down
and-
to pack in about a 30-minute conversation with you and me.
Yeah, so
It was-
me and
it was
Chad were
crazy.
like, "Hey, let's go sit next to this dude and like talk to him." So we did, and yeah, the conversation was a long conversation, and then we ended up, you ended up with the idea, the courage enough to go like, "Hey, what would you think of like coming to LaPine?"
Right.
And anyway, they're coming. It's weird that
Yeah.
they're coming to this.
I kind of thought he was blowing smoke,
Yeah.
and long story short,
Well,
he
he
wasn't.
was.
I mean, yeah, he wasn't blowing the proverbial smoke. He was blowing actual smoke.
He was blowing blow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're coming tonight. It's going to be a good show. Weather's going to be good. Yeah, so if you're into Johnny Cash,
Yeah,
you
come
should
on down.
come. If you're not
It's
into Johnny
worth
Cash,
seeing.
you should come anyway because they're just going to
Yeah.
be that good.
If he doesn't have too much liquor ahead of time, like they're really good.
Yeah.
They're not as good if he has too much liquor, because
Right.
we've seen both,
Yeah.
and it's still good, but it's not.
Yeah,
as
it's good either way.
Yeah, come
So-
down.
So what kind of got us on this kick? They have this interesting rider, so they send a rider in advance. They here's kind of our requirements for the green room, and they got a lot of requirements for their green room. I'll just leave it at that.
Dude, it's fun. I thought it was a joke when you sent it. I
Yeah.
really did think it was. I'm gonna keep it. I actually screenshotted it so I can.
I can give you an actual copy of it if you want.
I would love an actual copy.
All
of
right.
it.
It was a long list of kind of odd stuff.
Yeah, odd
But-
stuff, and a lot of stuff for 5 people. I mean, a lot of stuff for 5 people.
You mean a lot of alcohol for 5 people?
Well, and other like peanut butter and jelly, and
Yeah.
a meat tray and a veggie tray. I mean, and we're feeding them dinner on top of all that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're paying them a lot of money on top of all that.
We're not,
Yeah.
the church isn't paying him anything.
No, but church isn't paying them.
No. Park and Rec District
Hey, it's
is
Johnny.
paying for this.
I mean, if they would have asked,
Church might
we,
get
we
points
could have voted, you
Yeah,
know. But
that's funny.
yeah. So anyway, come down to Frontier Heritage Park in LaPine tonight, 5:30 to 7:30. Johnny Cash.
There's no opening band, right? They start at 5:30.
They start at 5:30.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah. Anywho,
All right, let's go.
we bantered unusually long today. So
We're gonna talk about something today that we could probably just talk about every week. Because
we're going to give people tips.
what are we? We're gonna give people tips.
on how to be
For-
tempted.
Tips for temptation, and you can take that however you want. We mean it in the good way.
Yeah.
Tips to help you fight temptation.
I
Tips
saw the
for
title and I kind of laughed.
Yeah.
Temptation, yes, because this is one of those stupid things, annoying things that never seems to go away.
Yeah.
And for
Well,
the
there's probably some methodology. Like if we would have called this tips to fight temptation, people are like, eh. But tips for temptation,
Yeah.
people might be like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
well,
piques
I need
your-
to check that out.
piques their curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, oh, how can I be better at
Right.
being tempted?
Right, and we're all about the clicks. So
Yeah, totally.
Right.
So, what is it? Let's just start there. I think everybody knows, but if you were to give like a definition of this thing, temptation. What is temptation?
definition of temptation.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about that? I never really thought about it until
I
I
haven't.
wrote it down. I'm like,
Yeah.
goodness, a definition of temptation. How would you?
I mean,
define
I
it?
guess the illustration is what comes to mind of what you've got at the beginning in the garden with the tempter that comes and tries to lure people away from God, and so I immediately kind of thought of the enemy, Satan, who
Yeah.
kind of wants to kill any opportunity that there is for us to glorify God and worship Him in the rightful way.
Yeah.
Because of jealousy and because of pride and things like that. So that's more the definition of the tempter, but
Yeah.
his methods as far as tempting us are wide and varied because like a good fisherman, he knows how to bait a hook and
Yeah.
catch,
He's not stupid.
no.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. That's maybe
Yeah.
the scariest part about our adversary is he's not dumb. Like he's a lot smarter than we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chad,
But there's
what do you-
that draw that we have to be pulled away from God. because of the fact that there's a tempter and because of the fall. Both of those things are real. That we can easily be lured away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went a little less spiritual in my thinking of the definition of temptation. So there's a meme out there where there's a guy who's walking with his girlfriend, like holding his girlfriend's hand, and he's looking back at the girl that just walked by while his girlfriend's looking at him. And then there's different, like, people do different things with the meme and put, different captions.
That one's used a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've probably seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have seen it many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's looking at something that he shouldn't be looking
Right.
at. And the person that he should be looking at sees him looking at this.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And isn't happy about it.
Yeah.
Not happy about it.
Yeah.
I put, it is that which points us away from what is good.
That's better. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's concise, so I like that. It's not too exhausting to say, but it's also maybe a little bit generic. But I think maybe if I boiled it down, it's just that thing which appeals to us, which draws us away from that, which is
Well, might need to define in that definition what good is, because people would have different thoughts.
Well, that's what
about what's
I
good,
couldn't help
right?
but think about the fact that if you've done away with kind of morality, what's right and wrong in
Yeah.
general, which in a postmodern kind of world,
Yes.
that's even questionable.
Yes.
Then temptation isn't even a thing.
all right. What's good?
Yeah.
Actually, let's do this.
Yeah, I feel like
Let's go Matthew chapter 4, and let's just read the first 4 verses. And I think this will probably address some of these things that we're actually
Right.
going into right now. If we do just an overview of what we read here, we got Jesus here was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. That right there is not a awesome. That's a dumb. I don't like that. He was led up there to be tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days, 40 nights, he was hungry, and the tempter came and said to him, "If you're the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." What are some of the insights that we have just in these 4 verses concerning temptation?
This might be a different conversation for a different time, but that
Or
he
it might work now, Chad.
that he was led to be tempted.
That's
Like that kind of messes with us.
That first verse is
That's
weird.
That's gnarly.
He was led by the
By the Spirit.
to be tempted.
Yeah.
Do you think he knew this was going? Does it kind of give us the impression like he knew that, hey, I'm going to go be tempted? Or
Can't imagine Jesus not knowing something.
he doesn't know the day and the hour, Chad. Let's
Right.
not even.
Well,
Bro,
okay,
you
all
walked right into that
that's,
one.
That's fair. I did walk into that one. You slammed that door in my face. All right.
Yeah.
Fair.
I mean, in order to be our high priest and our intercessor and the one that knows what it's like to live in one of these,
Yeah.
he had to be tempted, like
Yeah.
we're tempted, and so
Yeah.
the fact that the Spirit led him away to do this is
Yeah.
part of the deal for him.
I think
to
it's
be-
even Hebrews that says
Yeah.
that he was tempted at every point that we
Yeah.
are, yet
Yeah.
without
Exactly.
sin. And why is that? Well, because he's fully man. Like he's the Son of Man.
Yeah.
He's fully man.
Yep.
Like that's part of what it is to be human, is to experience things that are extremely human.
Yeah.
Right. And come through it. And so for whatever reason, whether he knew or not that this was happening, or whatever,
right.
like
He was led into it.
Yeah,
It wasn't happenstance.
yeah. What was he tempted with here? Something that's good or bad? This comes back. This is why I decided to
Yeah.
read this, is because you just started going there, like what is good, and like actually what he was tempted with is not a bad thing here, right?
Right.
So what makes it a bad thing, or what made it a temptation? I don't have the answer. I just thought it was a good question.
Yeah, no, it is a good question.
Yeah, I don't know. I got nothing intelligent to say, David. How's that? I mean, I can't help but think that anything that we try to make as a priority over God, I think we do that with a lot of things. So you can put your job, which is a good thing, or
Yeah.
your marriage, which is a good thing, or your kids, which is a good thing. You can
For
do all these
sure.
things. You can place a kind of more importance or
Yes.
more love or more devotion to those things, which then becomes idolatry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of
Yeah. I think that like maybe God is the greatest good, obviously, right? And the pursuit of God in our lives and a full dependence and commitment to God and nothing else in our lives is the greatest good. And I think that's what we're seeing here, because food obviously is not bad. In fact, if you're a human being like Jesus was, you kind of need it in order to live. So it's
Right.
not like, right. But
Yeah.
it seemed that there was a greater pursuit going on, a greater statement to be made in pursuing the greatest good, which was his Father at this point, and just a dependence, a satisfaction there, right? And I guess the point is like, we can have things sometimes that aren't necessarily bad, that can become a temptation too,
Right.
right?
Right.
Well, I think like here we see, Satan tempting Jesus really to pursue his own interests,
Yeah.
and Jesus being resolute in pursuing the Father's interests.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Um,
Or maybe even which would even be a form of suffering, right?
right.
Of like willfully lacking something that makes
Right.
you uncomfortable. So again, even right here, we see that there's a theology of suffering here,
Yeah.
right? And a gaining of something better,
Right.
rather than immediate satisfaction.
Right.
Let's shut off that suffering. I know what to do. I'll eat. you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and the goal is to change allegiance. I mean, he's
Boom.
I want you to
Yeah,
I want
there
you to
you
come
go.
to this come over here, come
Yes.
to this team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what really the tempter's doing.
God's
So-
not
so-
filling your belly right now, but I can.
Yeah, and of course he'll use good things to do that. But
Yes.
again, the reason that it's temptation or evil is because of the allegiance thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
And you see it. I mean, you just see it all the time in people's lives and in Christians' lives.
Yep.
They're kind of moving over to that thing that makes them feel good, makes
Yeah.
them happy, whatever it is.
Yep.
And they're not really seeing it as an allegiance thing, but
Right.
oftentimes it is.
Well,
Yeah.
even just the thought that, well, God would want me to be happy, right? And people will lean on that and use that as their excuse to pursue something, maybe a good thing that they're
Yes.
pursuing in a way that's not good.
Yes.
Because,
I mean,
well, of
even
course,
stuff
God
that's-
would want me to have this or
Stuff
do
that's
this.
obviously bad, like I'm
Yeah.
going to leave my wife and go be
Right.
with this other woman because my happiness is and it's like, are you serious right now? But we can,
Right.
we can convince ourselves of just about anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said earlier, the tempter is what you called him. That's what he's called here. The devil is called the tempter. And if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. What's he doing with Jesus here?
Well, he's probably, I mean, this might be reading into a little bit, but Jesus is fasting. He's probably hungry. And so the tempter's appealing to, a weak spot or,
Yeah.
a chink in the armor almost that like he's got to be hungry. And then he's questioning if you are
Yeah.
the Son of God. So
I
he's
see
kind
that appealing to his pride. Like
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
can see,
yeah.
I can see that
No,
thing of
totally.
like, if you think you're so
Yeah.
smart,
Totally.
if you think you're so strong,
Yeah.
if you think you're so, try, there's that kind of aspect
Sure.
of like, prove it,
Yeah.
and it,
Yeah.
and-
He's also appealing to like his ability to fix this right now, like what he's feeling.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you can fix this right now is what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead.
well, and at a point of
Fix it
weakness,
right
I
now.
mean, he's hungry,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and he wants to eat.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And so the most important part, like, what does Jesus do here? Like, what's the response? This is the first tip, which isn't
Challenge
really
accepted.
included in
That's
a.
his- no.
Yeah.
That would be our response. Okay, challenge accepted.
Yeah,
You're-
yeah.
we're throwing down.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I mean, he appeals to the word of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
and
Yes.
uses the sword of the
Yeah.
to fight back.
Yeah. He speaks. Yeah, he speaks truth.
Truth.
Right. He speaks it to himself. Obviously, he speaks it out loud. But he appeals to truth to be his defense, rather than just sitting on his hands and sweating his way through it and hoping that
Right.
it'll pass and all that good stuff. Like there's a proactive response, which is a truth response, right, to combat the lie. And I know a lot of times in my life, like this is exactly where I go wrong. Is like when that thing comes in that I'm entertaining or whatever, is there's not necessarily my first response isn't with truth to myself, right? To combat
Right.
that thing. So a lot of times I'm not even identifying the lie or identifying the falsity of what it is that's happening because I'm not identifying the truth response to
Sure.
it, right?
Well, and even the desire, which is it's a bummer, but when you want to do something, the truth is
That's pretty
that
strong.
This isn't really going to make you happy.
Yeah.
This really isn't going to quench your thirst. This really isn't going to satisfy you.
Yeah.
But then your flesh is going, maybe it will.
Yeah.
Maybe
Oh,
this
totally.
time.
Well, if
it
we didn't have a
will.
desire, then there wouldn't be temptation. Right?
Right.
We're not tempted by things that we don't desire.
Right. Which is obviously what we have in the garden, right? Where it all started was a thought of like, you can have this thing which you lack, and there was just no. It was just like, yeah, you're right. Why am I lacking that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's go handle that. So, temptation also is not just big things. I realize, like I know that looking at this, like these are pretty big things. Even if you go on through the narrative, you've got, I'll give you the kingdoms, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or the angels will come and resurrect you if you jump, you know, or turning these rocks into bread. But like temptation's also like super small things, right? Like it can be your response to a dude that just cuts you off or is going too slow in front of you on the road, right? Like how you're wanting to like. There's a temptation to respond to that a certain way. Like it can be really small things too. Even the way that I respond to my wife after she says something, whatever it is she might say, or saying it a certain way. There's that trigger that's like, well, we'll get to triggers, but temptations obviously come in all packages.
Sure.
They're not just these huge things. They're things that are really small that can pull us off our game too. You were going to say something, Brent?
Well, I was just thinking of the progression of. I mean, I think James chapter 1 kind of walks us through the progression of how it comes about. And it starts out by saying, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, which is important to begin with. God doesn't tempt us to do evil or tempt us to sin. So, you know.
Yeah, the tempter in Matthew 4 is the devil.
Yep.
It's not God.
Yep.
And it says, for God cannot be tempted with evil.
Yep.
He still finds a way to use evil, and he finds a way to use these things to glorify himself. But then it says, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And that's the starting point. There's something in us that it's already there. It already wants these things. And then what we do with it from there is kind of where it goes bad. Then desire when it has conceived. So you almost have this birth of something where you entertain it, you think about it, you want it. When it actually comes to life, it gives
There's
birth.
a progression.
It gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death.
Yes.
And that's always the pattern.
Always the pattern.
We can count on it. It's like clockwork.
It starts with a thought, and then the end of the chain is conception.
And the thought's
if we chain it.
The temptation might be the thought, but again, where if we kill it there, if we squash it, it's not sin. Sin hasn't happened yet. You know? And so Jesus really does know what it's like to be tempted. And I think it's important because we wonder, well, he's God. He didn't have. No, he had the same thing.
Same thing.
Him.
Yeah, he really was hungry when this happened.
Yeah.
Right? Like he really, really wanted some food, like badly, and he knows he could have produced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wish that we believed what the scripture says, that it leads to death.
Yes.
And it's not it can be physical death in the sense of that's sin does that, but just that feeling of death in our relationship with God, that kind of breaking of the fellowship that we have with him, it's like it's never satisfying for a Christian.
Yes.
It never ends well.
Yeah, and it also like implies like sin leads to the temptation which leads to sin leads to death, but also like the resistance of temptation then. Like implication is that is life.
Yeah,
sure.
And I saw some dude say this. I really liked this when I thought about it. It says when it comes to the subject of temptation, we tend to look at all the bad that it's leading us to, rather than all the good it's leading us from. And I think that's really interesting to have that perspective. We're looking at can't do this because it's going to do this, and but it would be helpful for us to look at all. Like the fight of it and the resistance of it, like the good that comes from that, which will actually will actually end up going to. So it's not just like, oh, this is leading me to this bad thing, but it's also trying to rob us of good things. I mean, this is really what happened in the garden.
Yeah, the thief came to steal, to kill, and to destroy.
Yeah.
And that's what, this is where these things, it's going to steal something from you. It's going to take, it always,
Well, let's start with that jerk.
Yeah.
Well, from the beginning, the temptation is, did God really say?
Yeah. So
like causing us to question God's goodness.
Yes.
Question the good things that God does for us and gives to us.
So tip number 1 was know your enemy.
Yeah.
Tips for temptation: know your enemy. Chad, you're already getting into that. Why does this? How does this help us in temptation to know who our enemy is?
Well, to know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
To know where the fight is. I think we've talked about before, just, like our fight isn't against flesh and blood. Right. We have an enemy that we can't see.
Right.
But we know is there, and you are not my enemy. The enemy is out there. We need to know who he is, and that helps us engage in the battle in the right way.
I like the verse that talks about that we're not to be unaware of his schemes or his tactics, because he's not especially creative. He kind of repeats the same things he always does.
For sure,
he's good at it. But it's kind of like going into war or battle.
Yes.
To know your enemy well and to know their tactics well is going to help you to be successful.
Yeah.
And so
I was thinking that with hockey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, part of the way that these guys prepare in between games with the next team that's coming up is they sit and watch video
Right.
of
Watch
that
film.
other team
Sure.
play,
Yeah.
and so they're knowing what that team's strengths are, what their weaknesses are, how they do things.
So we
right?
should start doing that. Just film people being tempted. Now, right here is where you see.
Yeah.
You see, yeah. It's like, this is where he fell.
There's a reality show there that might
Yeah.
work.
I think it's important for us
Temptation
to
Island,
know
yeah.
that temptation's not just this thing. I mean, it is a thing that exists as a result of the fall and sin in
Right.
us, but it's helpful for us to know that Satan is our enemy and that he's basically the originator of it all. It's where it all started and comes from. And in that, knowing that he will never be for us. Like, he's never for us. He's always for our demise, right? Because I think one of you said it earlier, sometimes a temptation will look neutral or like we don't know what, like, I don't even know if this is a temptation. This might actually be good.
Yeah.
It actually can be appealing in the moment, like it's going to fix something. And we need to just know that the guy behind it is never trying to fix anything.
Right.
Like Satan is always against us. He's never for us. And so it's important for us to know that he's the one who brings it. Yeah.
I've also found it kind of interesting in Ephesians 6 where it talks about, the armor of God and the battle and all that. And there's this section that seems a bit random when he's talking about, relationships with parents and kids and husbands and wives and bosses and employees. And then he goes into this spiritual warfare kind of aspect. But I think that's there to remind us, like, the spouse isn't your enemy, your kids aren't your enemy, your boss isn't your enemy. It's not their fault.
Correct.
It's easy to, kind of those relationships in particular to point at those relationships and say, well, they made me do that, or they caused me to do this, or, whatever. And Paul just reminds us, like, they're not the enemy. It's not their fault.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I was thinking of Job. That, when you think about Satan's attitude towards Job and what he wanted to do, what he wanted to accomplish, he wanted Job to curse God to his face. That's what, like, all this was about. If you let me do this, he will curse you to your face.
Yeah.
And that's like that. This is who we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Somebody who wants us to deny God, to curse him, to abandon our relationship with him.
Yeah.
Like Satan did.
Yeah.
And so this guy's evil, and he wants to see us. He wants to
Yeah.
rip us away from,
He's out for
from
blood.
God. If he could, he would.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's not an option. if
We'll
you're
end up
him,
in that passage,
Yeah.
1 Peter 5, which really gives us an idea of what he's all about. But the bottom line is, like, Satan's favorite strategy is to make what is sinful appear to be desirable and good. And this is what's so scary about him as an adversary, right? Like, this is, in my opinion, like the definition of demonic.
Yeah.
It's because it's so deceitful, The demonic to me is not some scary image or something like that. Like people try to say, like, it's this dude who's trying to act like he's for you while he's killing you the whole time.
Yeah, he doesn't
He's
come
like-
walking in with a
Right.
hay fork,
Yes.
and a red suit, and,
Yes.
and all that. He's actually
Yes.
coming in as an angel of light.
Yes. He's
appearing to be
promising
good.
life
Yep.
while he has every intention at the same time to take it from you. Right. This is how it all began. Right. In the garden. So, okay. Number 2. We're not going to get through this if we don't keep moving. Know your triggers. So number 1, know your enemy. Number 2, know your triggers. This is really helpful for me. I don't know about you guys, but what do we mean by triggers? Actually, you guys don't know because we didn't talk about it.
Well,
I'm assuming you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think of somebody that they knows that they have a struggle with alcohol, for instance.
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't be around alcohol. You probably shouldn't hang out in bars. You probably shouldn't go places where there's just alcohol flowing, like rivers. I don't know. Maybe
The
don't.
Nile?
Yeah, exactly. That would be like if you know that every time you get around something like this, you fall.
Yes.
Whatever it happens to be.
Yes.
Then stick away. Stay away from things
Yes.
that are going to prompt that.
Yes.
Right.
And we all have different triggers.
Yeah.
Right. We share some triggers, but we all have different triggers. So we need to be careful to look at what other people are doing and then, find excuse like what you're talking about to do it also, right? You may be challenged by a piece of chocolate cake. I am not, right?
Right.
And that doesn't make the cake bad or me bad. You know what I mean? It just means that you've got a trigger that's different than mine. And so it's really good for us to identify our weaknesses and our triggers, because that is what allows us to fortify our temple. It's what allows us to know what windows need to be locked and doors need to be secured and all that good stuff. Just awareness of what can set us off. Also, even emotionally, because a lot of times I think when we think about temptation, we think about these things outside of us that have a physical appeal. But there's those things that are way more difficult, like mentally, like psychologically,
Right.
That are triggers. So like if I'm haven't had something to eat and I'm a little bit ornery and a little bit irritable, then I'm more likely to be tempted to respond in ways I shouldn't or say things I shouldn't in the moment. You know what I mean? So it's even things like that. It's just
Right.
an awareness of like what I'm apt to do when I'm like this, right?
Right.
So
I would even ask the question, Danny, like how's your track record with temptation? You know, how many times do you win the battle? And probably for most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we lose the battle more than we win the battle.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that, okay, if I put myself in this position to have to fight, there's a chance that I'm going to lose the battle, right? So for the alcoholic that goes to the bar, like you put yourself in a position to have to fight temptation. Right. And you know, how's your track record in fighting? Like the reason that it's a temptation is because your track record isn't good.
yeah.
But you'll hear the the voice in their head saying, but you're going to go there. You've got people there that you're trying to talk
Right.
to about the Lord, and
Right.
this, you make all the reasons why this
Right.
could be a good thing.
Well, I just preached last week about having a Samaritan well and go, you know what I mean? And people can
Yeah.
easily say that like, oh, you're contradicting yourself right now. And it's like, no, like all these things need to be considered. Yes, have a Samaritan well. Don't go somewhere that you know you're just going to drown. You know what I mean?
Well, and again, this comes back to, can you do this to the glory of God?
Yes.
If you can, there's some things you can do to the glory of God. There's some things you can't. You cannot get
Yeah.
drunk to
Yes.
the glory of God.
Right.
Because drunkenness is sin.
Always bad.
You
Yep.
cannot, watch bad things on the internet to the
Yes.
glory of God, because
Right.
those things are not going to glorify Him. I mean, and so you got to call
Yes.
sin a sin.
Yeah.
And not try to justify it.
Yeah, by eliminating our triggers, it can help us eliminate like the frequency or the intensity, the amount of temptations that come. I
Right.
mean, that's how simple. That's really what we're talking about here.
Right.
Right. So just knowing like there's places we shouldn't go, people we shouldn't pal around with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's certain shows we shouldn't watch. There's certain music for some of us that we shouldn't listen to. Conversations we shouldn't, maybe participate in or dig in on. Apps
Right.
we shouldn't install on our phone, right? Just know what your weaknesses are so that you can know what to do, what not to do, where to go, where
Yep.
not to go.
Well, and even sometimes just be willing to take radical steps.
Yes.
To because of radical sin in your
Yes.
life. And so that's, the idea of plucking your eye out, and, not to go too far into that, but it's like Jesus is saying, it's better for you to go through life without an eye than end
Totally.
up in
Right.
hell.
Like take it seriously.
So take this seriously. This might involve something radical.
Yeah.
That it is even going to be kind of, annoying and irritating in
Yeah.
your life, because you have to, put these blockades and steps in place.
Yep.
But it's better than just continually falling into
Yeah.
the same pattern.
For sure.
I had a guy years ago who had a problem with watching bad things on the internet, and he was just real about that problem. And he was embarrassed to bring it up. He was a young guy and just embarrassed to bring it up, to guys older than him. But he put a system in place in his life when that temptation came. He knew that he had 3 or 4 guys that he could pick up the phone and call and say, I'm being tempted right now, to jump on the internet. And every time he's like, I'm so embarrassed that I have to make this call. But he knew the trigger, and he knew that he could call people and say, I need help, I need prayer right now. And I just always respected that about this guy that was real about his struggle. But not only that, but took steps to help mitigate the struggle.
Yeah.
Another good step in that process is to have guys that are checking in on you,
Right.
From time to time, knowing that's. Oh, are we getting ahead of things?
Yeah, that's okay.
Sorry, go ahead, David.
That's okay.
I didn't have.
Speaking of that, though, you know who does that really well? Are the 12 steppers, and they actually steal it from the Bible. Everything they steal is from the Bible. But when you go in, the first thing you're told is to find a sponsor, and that's that thing that the sponsor does.
Yeah.
Is you're calling that guy anytime you even begin to get stupid, right? So the phone calls are happening
Right.
before you're buying a bag of dope, or before you're walking out the house to buy a bag of dope, or whatever, you know what I mean? And so there's that constant,
Right.
kind of like what you're talking about, which
Yeah.
is helpful. Bottom line is we need to know our triggers so that we can eliminate as many openings for entertaining them as possible. All right. Number 3, stop it at the door. Now, Brent, you may go into James if you want in the progression. We need to stop this thing at the door. What does that mean?
Nip it in the bud.
Nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
Don't even allow it in the house, right? Proverbs 1, 10 and 15, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent, do not walk in the way with them, hold back your foot from their paths. In other words, you're done. Like as soon as you see it, like you're done. I always think of, myself spiritually as a house, and there are windows and there are doors, and and stuff that needs to be guarded and opened and closed, and things that need permission to come in and to stay out. And I kind of see it that way with temptation.
Yeah.
Is the, when you are able to identify what it is at the door, like look through your people or whatever, like don't even open it. Like stop the chain
Right.
of James, like right there.
Well, and don't just replace it with something that's just as bad but
Right.
different, because
Yeah.
you'll see that too. It's like somebody that struggles with alcohol, and they'll say, "Well, I have an addictive personality. I can't be around that."
Yeah.
But marijuana's fine.
Right.
That won't lead me into the same exact same place. And it's like, yes, it will. I mean, it's going to rob, it's going to steal, it's going to do the same stuff, but you'll convince yourself, okay, but then these pills that's different.
Right.
This won't be a problem. It's like,
Yeah.
if you have an addictive personality, stay away from addictive things. You know,
Exactly.
Maybe that's a good thing to,
Exactly.
Well, I think kind of the only way that we can engage in this battle in the way that you're talking about is if we realize that Jesus is better. Right?
Yeah.
It's not just recognizing that a behavior is bad or destructive. I mean, that's part of it.
Right.
But we're tempted by things, again, like we've already talked about, that aren't always bad or destructive.
For sure.
Right? And so there's got to be this realization for the Christian that what Christ offers is better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's the idea of like you can drink from a cesspool, that's going to make you sick, and or you can drink from the water of life, and it's
Right.
going to lead you to something better, and that's what we don't always believe that.
Right.
No.
But
We're just thinking this sucks because
Yeah.
there's this thing that I'm desiring really bad right now that I know I'm not supposed to have. That's all
Right.
we're thinking. We're just
No.
consumed by what we can't have.
Right.
Right. Rather than, like you just said, or that quote that I said earlier, like
Yeah.
the good things that it will actually lead us away from, like the
Yeah.
better things that it will actually.
and this isn't like
Right.
prosperity kind of stuff of
No.
prosperity
Not at all.
blessing, that kind of thing. But if God has given us blueprints for life, even in like marriage, He said, this is the way I want it to be. I want you to wait till marriage to do these things, and this is going to lead you to blessing. And then we do it the other way. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you won't ever be happy or have blessing from God, but it robs you of something.
Yes.
Right.
Something that the better thing.
Right. And that's the
And-
realization that we have to come to is
Yeah.
exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fighting temptation isn't just about, classifying things as good and bad and avoiding bad things. It's much more than that.
It's not just a denial or a loss, right? There's a gain.
Yeah.
It's different than what our flesh is telling us the gain should
Right.
be. But spiritually speaking, there is a gain with the Father and with our relationship with Christ in the Spirit by the resistance
Right.
and by the denial of the flesh.
Right. It's better to live the way that God has commanded us to
Every
live.
time.
Even
Yes.
if it feels like we're missing out on something.
Yes.
It's better to live in God's world, in God's way.
Yeah. So my own translation of the chain, the thought is where it starts, leads to entertainment. So what's different about entertainment is entertainment's when you actually start
Right.
developing the thought,
Yeah.
entertaining the thought.
Yeah.
Entertainment leads to delight or attraction. Attraction leads to desire. Desire leads to consent, right? And so there's this change. So we want to stop it at the thought to know, this is one of those things
Yeah.
right now. This is one of those things that can easily turn into an entertainment. I'm just going to move on, right? And just stop it at the door type of deal.
And this would answer the person who would maybe raise the objection, like, what's wrong with thinking about it if I don't act on it?
Right.
Right. This progression that James lays out is like, you're going to act on it if you
It's a
think about it,
trap,
right?
Yeah, it's an absolute trap. But if we can kill the interaction at the thought, like at the
Right.
outset, it will make it impossible for us to end up in sin because of it. That's
Right.
the good news.
But and that also means that you got to actually take some action at that point, because if you don't, I'm just going to stop thinking about that.
Yep.
And you don't.
Yep.
You've got to go replace that thought with something
Yeah.
else. So that might mean you leave the house and go for a walk, or
Yes.
there's things you have to do.
It takes exactly 23 minutes for your head to be over the temptation.
Oh, really? Oh.
I heard someone say that once. It's like, I'm glad you figured that out.
No, but you got to, maybe it means getting up, going someplace,
Yeah.
doing something else, calling somebody,
Well, Brent,
breaking that pattern.
You brought us right into the next one. Go ahead, Chad.
Sweet.
No, I was just agreeing.
Perfect segue. Number 4, we must remember that temptation is temporary. Okay, so
Praise God.
this brings
Yeah.
us now to some of what you just started to talk about. How does knowing this help us to fight? This to me is one of the best practical, pieces of knowledge we can have when we're battling temptation. Right.
Well, it's like knowing that this world is temporary,
Yes.
and that there's going to come a day when sin is gone, temptation is gone,
Yes.
tears are gone, suffering is gone. Jesus is going to just take care of all that once for all, right?
Yeah.
And so, whatever seeming suffering that we have now, or whatever we think we might be missing out on now, it's temporary in the scope of eternity.
Yes. Yeah. We used to, again, 12-step program, taking this from the Bible. One of the slogans is one day at a time, right? One day at a time. That's what it's talking about, is I don't need to sit here and trip out on a lifetime of not doing this or resisting this or fighting this or battling this. But right now, in this moment, like bite size,
Yeah.
I can do this thing. I can get through this thing. I can get past this thing. So we're talking
Yeah.
smaller periods, increments of time. They also say this too shall pass. One of the things I always tell myself, and I've learned to tell others when they're in a dark place, is like, you're not always going to feel this way, which is true. And you may feel that way again at some point. It may
Right.
come back, but you're not always going to feel continuously like you feel right now in this moment. And it's kind of that same idea with temptation. As strong as that pull might be, it's really good to know, like, this is going to pass, and I'm not always going to feel this way.
Right.
Therefore, while we're waiting for the knocking at the front door to stop, replacing it with something, doing something, this walks right into where you were going, Brent. So
Yeah.
I'll let you keep going that way if you...
No, I just think it's important to have an escape route.
Don't just
You
sit
know?
on your hands
Yeah.
and sweat.
You know, they teach you like
Right.
to be a defensive driver when when you're going through driver's ed. It's a long time ago, but you're scanning the mirrors and you're looking for, like, if something were to go down right now, where's my escape route? And that's where you think of 1 Corinthians 10, where God says, people use this in different ways, but he says he's never going to put you in a situation where you're tempted beyond what you can bear. He'll provide a way of escape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to be looking for those escape routes and planning for them. So, if you're thinking of something I want to do right now,
Yes.
and you don't just sit there and stew on it, man.
Idleness is like the devil's cue to come in twice as hard.
Yeah.
Like, idleness is not good, especially when temptation's
Yeah.
going on. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's the reality of our fallen nature and this body of sin and death that we
Yes.
still have, that wants to do what we want to do sometimes.
Yes.
And that's the frustrating reality of who we are sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like, who will save me from this?
Totally.
And thanks be to God that one day we will be finally saved from temptation.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just like, gosh, we should be praying that God would grant us repentance, that God would change our hearts, that
Yep.
God would, give us new desires. I mean, these are real things that we have to pray earnestly for.
For sure.
And because we, at the end of the day, like I said, desire is a real thing, and we still have it, and we got to fight with it. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it stinks, but one day
Yeah.
it'll be gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest bummer with temptation is that it's so relentless. It's just it just beats you down because it doesn't stop. It gets so tiring. So I like what you're saying. We have to be just as relentless in our pursuit of God,
Yeah.
right? When we grow weary is when, like, the battle, like, really goes sideways.
Yeah.
Is when we just stop fighting.
Right.
Well, and isn't that the kind of the key to it too? Is if
Yes.
there's still a fight, when you see somebody fully give in to some kind of temptation to say, I'm just gonna, I'm done. I'm doing this. I'm not, going to fight anymore.
Yeah.
That's scary.
I've seen that
Yeah.
happen with a few guys over
Yeah.
the years. Yeah.
That's scary. But
It
as
is
long
scary.
as, if it's still, you hate it and you want to fight against it,
Yes.
that's a sign that
Yeah.
Yeah.
God is in this with you, and
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and that He's present. Because if you can happily walk away and just live in that sin,
Yeah.
I don't know what that means exactly, but
Yeah.
it scares me.
Yeah.
And the devil's crafty. We've already talked about this, but, like, I don't think it's very often that. Now, I'll just speak for me. Maybe you guys relate to this. I don't know, but for me, it's not very often when I've given into temptation that afterwards I think, oh dang, he got one over on me.
Yeah.
It's usually like I know, I know when I'm tempted to do something wrong
Sure.
for the most part.
Sure.
And there's sometimes I just don't care.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes
Yeah.
in the moment, like, I just don't have a fight.
Right.
Other times just the desire is great.
Yeah.
And you give in,
Yeah.
but it's not very often where after the fact I realize, like, oh, I sinned.
Yeah.
Like, I know going into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
No doubt.
Yeah. Oops. I
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We must, one of the things that will keep us from getting too weary and stop fighting is to know that temptation is temporary, that this will pass.
Yeah.
Like what I'm feeling right now and this struggle right now, like, I know he's still at the front door knocking. It's really hard not to open it, but, like, I just need to hold off a little longer. Like, this is going to go away. The knocking's
Yeah.
going to stop at some point. So,
And that God really does have the power to change us.
well,
Oh, yeah.
and that, Brent, you're segueing perfectly. You're just Surrender. Number 5. Number 5, surrender. Not to the temptation, obviously, but to the one who is bigger
Yeah.
than the temptation. Even bullies have a bully. All right. And I mean that in the best way that I can call God a bully.
No, I
right?
get you. Yeah.
So like if we're being bullied by something bigger than us, then we need to go to someone who's bigger than that. And we have him.
Yep.
We have a relationship with him. He cares for. He's not sitting around going like, "Oh, this is fun," watching him in this next temptation. I wonder how he's going to do this time. Like God's not doing that. Like
Yeah.
God is for us.
Right.
Unlike the other guy, he's for us, not against us.
Well, and I love that, if there's a good purpose in temptation, that was
Yes.
one of the questions you had.
It is.
It's that we would rely on God and that we would call out to
Absolutely.
him to save us, and that he would, we would have that functional savior
Yes.
that we need in him.
Yes.
And so I love that he's in the process of making us holy. He's promised he would.
Yeah.
And that just gives me hope every day that,
sure.
and when you look back, hopefully you see victory in sin and over sin, and maybe there's, you're
Right.
still maybe dealing with some of the same things, but man, I'm just so happy that he's promised to transform me into the image of his son. And
Yeah, he's going to
and
see us
faithful.
through, and he's going to be faithful even when
Absolutely.
we're not, right?
Right.
Which doesn't mean don't even try to be faithful, but it means like even when we're not, we have an advocate. Like
Right.
we have a finished work, right?
Yep.
So surrender has to be a definite component at some point. Like we can't just sit there and muster up in our own strength the ability to fight temptation.
Right.
We have to remember that we have someone who's actually capable on our side. So how do we do this? How do we surrender? What does this maybe look like? And what does it do?
Yeah, I think it comes back to realizing that Christ is better. I mean, I think that's a big component of it. Do you really believe that God is for you and that God is good, and that if God says don't do this, do you believe that the alternative is better? I mean,
Sure.
there's a faith component to this of taking God at His word.
Yeah, faith is huge in it, and it's weird because I know that at the end of the day, I don't have the power to do this,
Right.
but He does, and so
Right.
sometimes it's just believing that
Yeah.
yes, He saved me from the penalty of sin, He is saving me from the power of sin, but that's a process,
Yeah.
and then eventually He will save me from the presence of sin,
Yeah.
completely,
Yeah.
and that's ahead of me. But during this time, between the times, penalties dealt with, power is going to be dealt with, or presence is going to be dealt with. But for now, we have to rely on Him daily,
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
and trust that He is, and then it's just hopefully making the right choices through the day. And
So how are some of the ways that you surrender when you get into that's maybe part of the question. Like
surrender to God.
Yeah,
surrender
like
to
when
temptation.
you're in the moment, when you're in
I
the
can
middle.
tell you how to surrender to temptation.
Yeah, I'm an expert at that one too.
We could do a whole podcast on that one.
So what does surrender look like, right? Because even though it sounds like it's the giving up of something, like the emptying, it actually requires the doing of something, right?
There's practical things that we can do. I mean, it's funny how occasionally I've encouraged guys who will tell me that they don't have a drinking problem, but it sure looks like they do. And it's like, hey, stop drinking for a month,
Right.
1 month, nothing. See if you can do that.
Sure.
See if you can surrender that to God and what it looks like. And most of them, I mean, they'll make it a day or two, and then something came up, and there was a party, and there was an anniversary or something.
Yeah.
So it's like if you can't. I mean, so have those things in your life where you have little checks, and
Sure.
you literally surrender something for a time, and see what that looks like.
Yeah.
If you're spending too much time on your phone, watching whatever, I mean, there's so many ways you can do this. Give
Yeah.
it a period of time and just do without it, and then look at the fruit that
Yeah,
comes in your life
sure.
from it.
For
And a lot of times you'll find like, man, I'm happier. My time with God is more rich. All those things. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chad.
I think confession is a big part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
just naming it, right? Just being able to be real with yourself and say this thing, whatever it is a problem, or this thing isn't good, or this thing has a grip on me.
Yeah.
Just identifying it and naming it, and not just to yourself, but to other people.
Sure.
Right, to people that you trust in your life. And we're glad as pastors to always have those conversations with people, but it doesn't have to necessarily be us.
For sure.
Just identifying the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, identifying the problem is super helpful. That helps us, again, that goes through everything we talked about, like the triggers and everything else. I think the simplest way is just re-identifying who I am in that moment. So when I'm struggling right then, I'm listening to lies. I'm feeling a desire towards lies and things. And so to reestablish who I belong to. So like prayer is a simple way right then, like talking to God.
Yeah.
Your Bible, I mean, I love, again, that Jesus doesn't just sit there passively as he's taking this this thing from Satan, but he speaks truth. I think definitely need truth spoken to me, and that is a way that I'm surrendering the flesh. I'm surrendering the fleshly desire, the worldly desire, tendency that I have at that moment by having that truth
Right.
occur. So there's a lot of ways that we can surrender. Bottom line is like we can cast our cares upon him, for he cares for us, right? First
Yep.
Peter chapter 5-7. We're not going to be able to read the whole thing. We're not going to have time. But that's the text that comes out of that. Satan's like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Peter's trying to encourage the church, and because they're going through hard stuff that is tempting them to bail out
Right.
and take matters into their own hands
Right.
that are ungodly. Like it's all about a temptation. And this is where he goes. This is where Peter goes with it. Cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. He's on our side. So we surrender. Number 6, benefit from it. So the temptation. So this is tip number 6, benefit from it. And it's hard to imagine that there's any possible way that anything good could come out of that kind of a horrible, exhausting experience, but possibly.
Well, for me, I mean, there's that element of when you get victory over something, when
Yeah.
when your faith grows, when
Exactly,
when you
yeah.
see God's faithfulness in transforming you, it's proof that He's there. It's proof that He's working in you. It's proof that that He's really, really real,
Yeah.
and He's active in your life, and you're a legitimate kid because He's
Yeah.
moving you through this process of same way we do with our kids, where you're
Yes.
they're tempted to do these things. We're training them, we're instructing them in righteousness, and you begin to see them change. It's like it's huge.
Yeah, I thought of it like weightlifting. Like when I know what I feel like, what the feeling's like after I've failed and given into temptation, and I know what it feels like after I've resisted and stood up and had victory over temptation. And one is way more satisfying than the other one, way more satisfying. And a lot of times it's kind of like lifting weights, where you start with these small things. You have a victory here, you have a victory there,
Right.
and you're working yourself up. There's more weights going on there, so there's bigger temptations in the future that you're able to lift, and you're able to. And it is. There's such a reward over coming out the other side of righteousness and self-control that far outweighs what you did when you went in
Yeah.
and succumbed to the temptation.
I'm
So-
picturing you on a weight bench with the
Dude. Oh, yeah.
against your neck.
Right.
I think I can.
We can do it this way,
yeah.
where it's like you push
exactly.
it up and put it back. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Even when you blow it, I think our temptation or our tendency.
Actually, there's something to benefit from here too.
Yeah, our tendency when we blow it is that we want to hide from God, and
Yep.
we see Adam and Eve in the garden. That's what they did immediately when they sinned, is they hid
Yes.
from God, and God pursued them, and didn't show up in the garden, waving a finger saying, front and center
He
right now.
pursued them and clothed them.
Right.
Sorry.
And so even in our blowing it, we miss out if we don't use that opportunity to draw near to God,
Yeah.
trusting that He's good and that He's gracious and that He's forgiving,
Yes.
and all of those things. And so that there's a benefit there
Yes.
in drawing near to God. When
I remember
we do
somebody
blow
said,
it.
"Great sin draws out great grace."
Yes.
and it's true. You
Yes.
feel the love of God, the love of a Father who, even after you blow it, they receive you because of Christ, and
Yes.
it's to know that He knows all these things about us, and He still went to the cross on our behalf and did
Yes.
what He did, with full knowledge of past, present, and future sins.
Yeah.
That's like what a hug of from
Right.
God, that even in the midst of your filth and your depravity and all these things, your rebellion and I love you and
Yeah.
you're mine. That's huge. That's the gospel.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
Absolutely.
that his resistance of temptation in Matthew 4 with the devil
Yeah.
is ultimately ours.
ours.
It's imputed to us.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
This brings us to the final one: perseverance. I believe this is why the weary, beat down person with their temptations is able to persevere,
Yeah.
because of the gospel. It's because
Right on.
of Christ for us and what's already been done for us. And so we don't fail and go, I'm going to stop fighting. I'm just going to dip out because it's too hard and it's just going to keep coming.
Yeah.
We actually continue to get up because the grace of God, His kindness and goodness leads us to get up. If we can look up, we can get up, basically. And we don't have to just completely dip, on the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So as to where we've seen so many people do it.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
seen so many people give up and just go like, I'm done. I'm done fighting. I don't stop fighting because Christ is always before me, and His already work is always
Right.
always before me.
Yeah.
You know, we need to see the gospel after we fail.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just thinking as we're wrapping up here, connecting a dot to a couple of weeks back, we talked about church discipline.
Yeah.
This is the underlying,
Yes.
thing, why holiness matters and why God has instituted in his wisdom a process within the church for us to disciple one another
Yeah.
in these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, the key for sure, and the key again to staying in the game is to look to Christ as the author, perfecter of our faith. If we can't do that, if we're just constantly beaten down and defeated, we will start living defeated,
Right.
and that's the problem. So, the gospel is absolutely everything. Christ for us is everything, because it ain't going to stop till we go home.
Right.
Which was at the end of that passage in 1 Peter.
But as
we don't have
Christians,
enough
we
time.
are overcomers.
But we are
because of
overcomers
Christ.
because he has overcome.
The victory's won.
The victory's won.
Yeah.
But I would say for those practically struggling today,
Yes.
temptation is common to all of us. It's something everybody, it might be a different thing for different Christians, but this is something that, you need to take seriously.
Yeah.
And there's help. There's that idea of the 1 Peter passage. The thing we didn't talk about was the
Yes.
idea of if you're out there on your own and you're, not in the fellowship of believers
Right.
and you're not getting the help that you need and have accountability, you're really going to struggle.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, there's practical things you can put in place. We're willing to fight with you through these things and help you. And there's groups like Wednesday night. We have a recovery group that meets. It's funny how many guys struggle with stuff and they won't go to that.
Right.
That's not for me. Yeah, it's for you. It's absolutely for you.
Yeah.
Because that's what the church is. We're like a band of brothers that we join together to fight together in this.
Yes.
So we're not alone.
Well, this is where accountability partners are helpful too. Like it doesn't have to be a program thing, but like Christianity promotes accountability, confession of sin. We all ought to have that person at least,
Sure.
even more than one, in our lives somewhere in our body that we're able to be honest with and
Right.
talk things out with and go into battle with. Going into battle alone sucks.
Yeah.
Right.
And God's given us, like you just said, there's a whole band of brothers that he's given us to fight alongside each other. So accountability from somewhere regularly where your honesty can reign.
I'll add a quick note to that accountability only works to the degree that you want to be held accountable.
This is true.
Right.
Yeah.
But like you can kind of fake it in accountability, and it only works to the degree that you're honest and open and real with whoever you're
for sure.
trying to be accountable to.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're open, honest, and real, then it's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. When do you guys pray? We're done.
Yeah, I'll pray. God, thanks for today and our discussion. Pray that it was helpful for people, and just pray that you would help us all just in our battles daily with sin and with temptation, that you would help us to take some of these truths that we talked about today to heart, that you have overcome things that we can't overcome on our own. And so help us to trust in you, help us to trust in your goodness, grow our faith during the times especially that we blow it, help us not to be arrogant in the times that we have victory in temptation, and help us to continue to trust in you in all that we do. And we ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I think we're all here now for a while too. I don't think there's any more vacations. So, yeah.
Yeah.
See ya
All right.
next week.
See you next week.